The notorious and loudmouth boss of the PMC Wagner, Evengiy Prigozhin, has been killed. His private jet was shot down after departing Moscow for St. Petersburg on Wednesday at around 7 p.m. local time. On board was also Dmitry Utkin, original founder of Wagner, well known for his charming Nazi tattoos. If you remember, according to these people, Ukrainians are supposed to be the fascists. Now, while there are still some irregularities, for one, why Prigozhin's second private jet was allegedly circling above Moscow at the same time, and the question of course is, what will happen next? Revenge by Wagner? Will other generals side with them? Or have Putin and the Defense Ministry managed to re-establish control, sending a harsh warning signal to all those who oppose them? Anyway, to better predict what happens in the future, it's always good to take a look at behind the scenes. So, welcome to Talking Tactics, where this week, using sources in Ukrainian intelligence, we want to give you an exclusive insight into what is happening in Russia. By the way, we had this episode prepared before Prigozhin was shot out of the sky, but since this game of generals is so dynamic, we were forced to update. So, if I look different in some cuts, you are correct. It's not a glitch and you're not going mad. Anyway, down to business. Prigozhin's death is part of the seismic changes happening right now in the Russian military world. These changes are not caused by the desire for something positive, but rather by a power struggle, from the top level all the way down, inside the Ministry of Defense and out. To give just a few of many examples, the dismissal of Major General Ivan Popov, who lashed out and blamed mismanagement by the Russian leadership for the failed invasion of Ukraine. The apparently forced divorce of the daughter of the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu from her husband, one of Russia's most popular fitness influencers, who on more than one occasion has shown an anti-war stance. The arrest of ultranationalist ex-Secret Service officer and ex-defense minister of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, Igor Girkin. The assassination of submarine commander Stanislav Rozhitsky, who was allegedly involved in the brutal missile attack on Vinnytsia and was shot in the back while jogging. And the disappearance of General Sergei Armageddon Surovikin, who until January commanded all Russian forces in Ukraine until being demoted to deputy and then dismissed altogether. We're starting to see two main camps. The first is built around Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Valery Gerasimov, Chief of General Staff, and at least until the filming of this episode, also commander of the armed forces in Ukraine, but more on that later. And while these two are becoming ever more unpopular amongst common soldiers, but also higher-ranking officers, they still have some aces up their sleeve. Their closest allies include Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Trade and Industry of the Russian Federation, Denis Manturov, and Lieutenant General of Justice Igor Krasnov, who currently serves as the Prosecutor General of Russia. That's quite a powerful alliance, and together, binding the powers of industry, which in Russia also means weapons production and distribution, the Army High Command, and judicial power, they are trying to strengthen their position and get rid of all elements that currently seem to be brewing in conspiracy against them. So let's get right down to a practical example and give you an exclusive insight into how this Russian power struggle is playing out. It might get a little bit complicated, but bear with us, it's worth it. Shoigu's faithful partner in crime, General Gerasimov, recently ordered to remove all airborne troops from the bank of the Dnieper River. It should be noted that the 7th Airborne Division was the most combat-ready unit stationed in that area, having for a long time successfully defended the left bank. Now, these paratroopers were replaced by the 70th Motorized Rifle Division of the newly created 18th General Army, which is staffed with mostly mobilized servicemen. This essentially has destabilized this whole flank, and in fact, reports from various media show that cross-river raids conducted by Ukraine are increasing. So, why would he do that? All Russian troops located by the river Dnieper are commanded by Lieutenant General Oleg Makarevich, who has an exceptionally close friendship with two very famous and two very respected generals. One is Colonel General Mikhail Teplinsky, commander of Russia's airborne forces, and the other is the now vanished General Armageddon Surovikin. Teplinsky is a dodgy character who seems to be dancing on two weddings at once, if you will. There are rumors that a week before the rebellion, Teplinsky moved a number of units closer to the border of Ukraine with Russia, so that if Prigozhin went further, there would be troops there to support him. On the other side, at least while filming this episode, there were rumors that Putin has demoted Gerasimov, removing him from the command of the Russian forces in Ukraine and reducing him to only Chief of General Staff, instead giving the post to Teplinsky. The other friendship, the one between Lieutenant General Oleg Makarevich and General Armageddon Surovikin, dates back to 2004, when Surovikin was appointed commander of the 42nd Motorized Rifle Division stationed in the Chechen Republic by none other than Makarevich himself. In October 2013, Surovikin was appointed commander of the Eastern Military District, and he returned the favor. His first deputy and chief of staff of the district was General Makarevich. Later, both generals took part in combat operations in Syria. For the past months, these two were the main critics and supporters of the resignation of General Gerasimov and Minister Shoigu. While Surovikin is now missing, Gerasimov tried to weaken the leftover generals Makarevich and Teplinsky by destabilizing their region of responsibility in Ukraine, and thus essentially their position in the Ministry of Defense and in front of the big boss, Vladimir Putin. Now, this is where the Wagner Group and their notorious leader, Evengiy Prigozhin, come into play. In recent months, Prigozhin had been trying to win the favor of generals, who on the one hand don't have close ties to Shoigu, and on the other hand are dissatisfied with the way the invasion is going. To make them popular also amongst the population, Prigozhin openly supported especially two high-ranking generals, Sergei Surovikin, from whom we just heard, and Colonel General Mikhail Mizintsev. He publicly proposed Mizintsev to become the new defense minister and Surovikin as head of the general staff. Mizintsev, known to the Western press as the Butcher of Mariupol for leading the siege on the city, began rising through the army ranks even before Shoigu and Gerasimov took their positions. Mizintsev has fallen out especially with the Defense Minister Shoigu. After the beginning of the invasion and the siege and seizure of Mariupol, he was first exiled to deal with logistical support, and in April he was dismissed altogether, after which he became deputy commander of the Wagner PMC. Prigozhin obviously employed this general for a reason. Mizintsev, who has held key position in the general staff for the past 10 years, has obviously retained influence and ties with those many officers who he himself brought in or promoted. It is possible that Mizintsev's reputation among these people played a role in the bloodless capture of the headquarters in Rostov-na-Donu. Sergei Surovikin, the former commander of Russian troops in Ukraine, despite his demotion in January this year, remained one of the key people in the general staff who were not part of Shoigu or Gerasimov's inner circle. And obviously, due to the common history, it was easy for him to keep in touch with Mizintsev. Among the Russian army leadership, Surovikin is perhaps the most respected by middle and higher ranking officers. And even though we don't have 100% proof, it is very likely that the reason he is now disappeared is because of his very close ties with the Wagner Group. Ties that probably became that tight during the cooperation of Wagner and Russian troops under Surovikin's command in Syria. Despite the mutiny, Surovikin was the first general to publicly call on Wagner to stop. But even in this video, he described the PMC fighters as of the same blood as him.
Я обращаюсь к руководству, командирам и бойцам ЧВК «Вагнер». Мы вместе с вами прошли трудный, тяжелый путь. Мы одной крови.
The general recorded the appeal probably out of fear that the rebellion would harm the affairs at the front or harm him personally rather than out of loyalty to Shoigu, who a few years ago put the brakes on an important endeavor in his career. Surovikin was once supposed to command the newly created military police with extended rights to prosecute and conduct investigations, but Shoigu stopped him. How close Surovikin is to Wagner is shown by the following example. General Surovikin, at the time of the mutiny, was in the Rostov headquarters together with the deputy intelligence head, General Vladimir Alexeyev. We know this because Alexeyev also called on Wagner to stand down, and both generals clearly recorded their appeals from the same location. But in a video that surfaced on the morning of June 24, Prigozhin humiliates the General Alexeyev together with Deputy Defense Minister General Yevkurov, who was also there, but Surovikin is not with them. So, Evengiy Prigozhin and Surovikin seem to have obviously been in cahoots. After the failure of the mutiny and after his death, Prigozhin's candidates to replace Shoigu and Gerasimov, General Surovikin and General Mizintsev, seem, for now, to be more shadow figures, figuring out how to instigate their comeback. Will Surovikin maybe join forces with Mizintsev after Prigozhin's death? Will they actually have power and influence to execute a large change? But there is one more character, one that is still in the good graces of the government and that could become a key player in any future move made against the defense ministry. His name is Colonel General Alexei Dyumin. For Russian standards, he's surprisingly good-looking and composed. The former aide-de-camp to Putin and head of his security detail was also once part of the intelligence service GRU, and in 2014 was appointed head of the Defense Ministry's Special Operations Forces. For the last 7 years, Dyumin has been ruling the Tula region. His name comes up once in a while when there's any talk about Putin's successor. In interviews, Prigozhin has showered Dyumin with compliments for his leadership of the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Different sources claim that Dyumin informally supported the head of Wagner in his criticism of the defense ministry in the past months. Unlike many other governors who, at the beck and calling of the Kremlin on June 24th, recorded appeals in support of the president and condemned Prigozhin, Dyumin, however, did not comment at all. It is even rumored that he was a part of the negotiations between Wagner and Lukashenko due to his proximity to Prigozhin. So, we hope that with this video you got a bit more of a clear picture of what's going on behind the scenes or behind the burning airplane wreck. The future remains unwritten, as always of course, but all the signs point to the fact that, sadly, it's going to be a violent one. Thanks for watching Talking Tactics, hit like and subscribe, and see you next week.